So coming up to the start, I believe we're within the last 30 seconds. It's Charleston in black, St. Mary's in yellow. You see 2 quick tacks there at the pin. And it looks like there is an X flag, and it's Charleston middle boat. Juan Magley and Seppi McAdams are over. And a St. Mary's boat. I think that was
that
Joe
flag
Wallace.
has not come down yet, and so that's going to put St. Mary's deep in the 6.
So an interesting start here. Pretty even looking.
Yeah, Charleston leading that pair on the left, and maybe controlling that pair on the right, but St. Mary's in the deep 6.
And a red flag going against St. Mary's, I think, right?
Yikes. Would that have been just a Rule 42 thing?
I don't know.
A little bit too aggressive coming around that restart?
Could be. So a nice break there for Charleston as, actually St. Mary's is controlling that pair on the left. So looking at potentially having the first place, but a really deep 6 now, as John Wallace, I think that was over early and gets a red flag and now sailing into an umpire's chop. So St. Mary's looks like is crossing with the 1 early here, but they sure can't feel very good about that 6 being so far back. But Stanford, ending the day yesterday with a loss to Georgetown, and then taking a loss today to Charleston and now to Yale. So I would imagine that they're going to be on the outside looking into this Final Four.
Okay.
Back at the weather mark for black and yellow.
Looks like Charleston coming around in the 1. St. Mary's is right there, trying to shut the door and go play 2 here.
So yet another 1-4-5 versus 2-3-6, as there is that last St. Mary's boat.
And with the deep 6, Charleston just playing forward for the moment, seeing if they can keep pushing this race. Not ready to try to gap yet. I think that makes sense at this point.
As that gap is sort of taking care of itself.
Yeah, what do you think? Will they try to go high-low here and try to go for that play 1, or do they just spread it out, not get engaged, and just
looks
keep
like it. I would look
downwind?
for this boat 12 here for Charleston. That's the high boat, Ben Spector, I believe, to jibe stay away just as he did and keep breaking overlaps, pushing this thing down, trying to get to the edges, put himself in an opportunity there as you see him just staying away as the St. Mary's boat jibes to regain an overlap, and that's a really good way to help out Mac Mace there in first place, again, because he's so fast. Help him out in the event that a pass back becomes necessary. So interesting, Charleston here not playing back.
Well, let's head on down to the starting line here as we've got Roger Williams coming up in blue versus Georgetown in red for race 117, the third to last race of the top 8 round.
And the Dodge just coming off a big win against Brown a few races back.
All right, well, it looks like Paul Perry from USF has just gotten back with his handwritten scores. The updated standings, these should be even more updated than the ones we've got online. 15-4 for Yale. That puts them in the lead. St. Mary's in second, 13-6. Charleston tied. Oh, actually, wow, 3-way tie. Look at this. St. Mary's, Brown, and Charleston all 13-6. So that's why this race is so important between St. Mary's and Charleston. Back in the 5 spot is Georgetown, 12-7. Now, Georgetown does have this race right here to try to tie it up. So, really nothing decided yet.
So the loser of this Charleston race would end up tied with Georgetown in the event that Georgetown wins against Roger Williams right now.
We do have a lot of what-ifs. And we do have that yellow flag, too. That was a bit weird.
Yeah. That was in that Yale race, was it not?
Yes, I believe so.
So that race that was a win for Yale against Stanford, there was a yellow flag. So it could be a protest hearing. As we check back with these black and yellow boats coming down the run here, this is Charleston and St. Mary's. last we checked, it was a 1-4-5 for Charleston, and they decided to play forward, and I'm not sure that it's worked out, as the deep 6 has now caught up a little bit and may actually be ahead now of a Charleston boat. I can't tell. So St. Mary's has hung on to the 1, and this looks like it's shaping up to be a 2-3-6 now for Charleston, so it does not pay off their aggression on that run.
We've got some tiebreaker info coming from our fans online. Georgetown apparently 2-0 against Charleston, so that would be a tiebreak in honor, going to Georgetown 1-1 against St. Mary's. So that would still be tied.
So St. Mary's and Charleston here in a heated battle. There was a hand in the air from, I think, Magley. This, of course, a rematch from last year's championship race. And yeah, just to clarify the yellow flag, this is a limited umpired event. The umpires have what's called a floater out there who's going kind of not designated to a specific race, but going kind of back and forth. So this is limited umpiring, meaning the yellow flag system can be used in the event that the umpire doesn't see it. So we've got here 2-3-6 for Charleston as Magley now tacks out to try to set up the pass back with Spector going left. But boat 4 for St. Mary's trying to keep that gap on Magley. So 2 pass backs need to happen here. You see Mac Mace deeper in the screen trying to slow down boat 6 for St. Mary's, and Spector here trying to slow down boat 4. Magley should be thinking just speed, speed, speed. He does not need to be luffing there. And now the 1 is also getting involved for St. Mary's. So this is a tight one. A really nice job by boat 4, staying ahead of Magley there. And now they're almost double teaming, it seems, Magley in the 6. So it's all happening. And still can't pin as boat 4. Can we tell who that is in boat 4 for St. Mary's? That'd be the low boat.
Coming up. It could be Jake Ladow.
I don't think it's Ladow. I think it must be Fletcher Sims, who just tacks out there as Spector is now pinned by the 1. So is St. Mary's thinking play 1 here? Certainly the right still being controlled by Charleston, as now Spector may have wound himself into a bit of a lefty.
The whole fleet looks pretty wound up at the moment. Everybody tacking.
Just so everybody knows, my heart is pounding right now. I'm freaking out, man. And here comes Mace to come over and get back involved. And St. Mary's puts a lee bow on him. And boy, I do not know how this one is going to shape up. So hard to tell with the depth perception as always, but I'm thinking actually that boat from the right for St. Mary's has just crossed, but now sailing back. And getting light and choppy there as we see 2 fleets converging, umpires as well. And tough to tell how much of a piece of that boat for Charleston that St. Mary's has. I'm starting to think this doesn't look all that good for my Cougars, Chris.
Sorry, Zeke. St. Mary's really doing a good job, like we said before, course awareness, able to look all the way across the course, see that all the pairs stay balanced.
So now getting vulnerable to the left, though, and a green flag from an umpire. They're not quite in the finish box yet. But those 2 St. Mary's boats there were last ahead of the furthest left Charleston boat, and you see them both crossing, Mac Mace and Corey DeColibus. Big luff there, so it looks like trying to do a little pass back with the guy on the right for St. Mary's. So St. Mary's is thinking play 1. They seem to have an ace in the hole as well, as they've stayed ahead of Magley in the 6 who would be far screen right, not in the picture at the moment. And here comes St. Mary's. Is this going to be a 1-2-3 for St. Mary's, Chris?
It does look like it could be. If they're crossing this last boat, yes, St. Mary's totally in control. All 3 boats ahead of all 3 of your Cougar boats. That leftmost Charleston boat, your best chance right now.
But being controlled by the one for
Totally
St. Mary's.
controlled on the left side.
So all boats racing forward, no balancing going on here, so St. Mary's must feel relatively comfortable as they're approaching that finish line. A little bit vulnerable to the far left boat for Charleston. I don't think it's going to matter much.
And as we mentioned, both of these teams tied for 2nd overall, tied with Brown. This race will be breaking that tie in just a minute here. And so
here comes the cross from the right. St. Mary's certainly leading the left, and a lead back to the right by St. Mary's. So I wonder if those 2 Charleston boats have a piece. Maybe we can zoom in a little bit here on the finish. As St. Mary's maybe just thinking get in the box. They cross both Charleston boats, and they're going to cross the finish line here with a 1-2-5, it looks like.
that's going to bump St. Mary's up into 2nd all by themselves with a record of 14-6, just 1 race away from Yale with 15 wins. Charleston now 13-7.
Fudge.
I hear you, bud. That's gonna, at the moment, that puts them in 5th.
I don't want to hear a word from Justin Law.
But we got some more races coming up here.
Not a word, Justin Law. Don't. You're such a child. You are such a child. Grow up. So at the leeward mark, I believe just, I'm not sure where we are. Yes, okay, sorry. Got confused with the orange and red scenario, but we've got Roger Williams in blue racing against Georgetown in red. Sorry to those fans as we've been ignoring them. They're on their last beat. And I'm not sure how they came around the mark, actually. I think Georgetown has a 6, it looks like.
There you go.
But they may have a 1-2-6 actually shaping up here. Was it? That looks like a 1-2-6 to me for Georgetown.
I think you're right. I think Georgetown's got 2 boats sprung up the course. The 2 boats on port going away from us, leading their pairs by a significant margin. The challenge now for Georgetown is just to keep it balanced. And you can see the one on the left already ragging that jib, trying to make sure that that happens. We saw in the last race pretty significant shifts. St. Mary's was able to handle them.
Yep.
But Georgetown now,
And looks like they're almost laying the finish there. This far left pair and this massive lefty. So
as
a really
the day
nice
goes on,
job.
it seems to be clocking left as it did yesterday.
So a nice job there balancing early by Georgetown.
So just to update this, Georgetown was in 5th. A win here would tie them with Charleston. And as we said, Georgetown 2-0 against Charleston.
And how about this live footage? We're not cutting out at all anymore, are we?
Now this is the medium. This is the medium setting.
It's always good to go with medium. You know, you don't want to be too aggressive. We don't need it all.
Can't do it all.
We don't need too much.
Do what we can.
But yeah, that sure is nice for Georgetown as we see this massive lefty and they're laying the finish from so far away. That makes your leverage issue much easier. As even that lower boat for Georgetown seems to be crossing. And I wonder if we're seeing some current also pushing up over there because they were able to lay that finish from pretty far away. So this looks like it's going to be a win for Georgetown over the Dodge. And that, I believe, will be the last race for Roger Williams, who I don't believe is going to have enough wins to make it into the Final Four. Is that correct?
It is correct. Roger Williams 11-8 coming into this one. This puts them 11-9, and that is going to end their season right there. Roger Williams, pretty good showing for a team that really, didn't have a whole lot of depth this year. They've got some young players in the two boats, Alec Anderson, Alyssa Seifert, of course, veterans of that team.
And I had a chance to talk to Alec on day one, after day one, and he was all smiles as they were just, I think, sitting at 500 after day one, and he was really happy with that result. So they must be even more happy the fact that they made it into this gold round and finished pretty well, a few races above 500, but that should end their team racing season.
Just an update on that Yale-Stanford race. We had the yellow flag out there. No news yet. We talked to John Vandemore, coach of Stanford. He hasn't heard anything. So we do assume that there would be a hearing, but no news on whether that's happened yet or if we know an outcome.
And
So
that
we'll
race went
continue to
in the books on the water as a win for Yale
That's
over
right.
Stanford. So we'll see if that holds true. So at the starting line now, we've got Stanford again in green against Navy in orange. So let's see if Navy can continue to shock the world here, just coming off a win against Charleston. And Stanford still looking for their first win of the day. So they're on, what, like a 3 or 4 race losing streak right now.
Yeah, and this race really consolation at this point. Stanford 11-8, Navy 9-10. Neither of these teams are going to be eligible for the Final Four regardless, but it will count toward their overall standings, which actually doesn't look like either team can improve. Stanford could overtake Roger Williams in the standings. I'm not sure what their tiebreaker situation is, but they're really fighting for 6th or 7th place right now.
So the last race of the gold round will be Yale versus Brown. They're not on the water yet, but how's that going to affect
Good
standings?
question. Well, Brown could, with a win there, Brown could clinch the top spot. Excuse me, that's not possible. Yale has 15 wins. Brown could improve their record to 14-6, or they could drop to 13-7, which would actually put them tied with Charleston and Georgetown. So either they can tie with St. Mary's for 2nd, or they can 3-way tie with Charleston, Georgetown for 4th. And we have to look into tiebreaker situations
so
there.
Yale has clinched the top spot, correct?
Yes, they have 15-4. They are not going to be caught in this top 8 round.
So Yale's clinched the top spot. St. Mary's is in, and we could end up with Charleston, Georgetown, and Brown all tied.
So I'm going to look up some tiebreakers while you call this race.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. So again, looking at Stanford in the green boats, Navy in the orange boats. I think it's looking all right for Stanford in green at the moment. This is breeze freshening up again a little bit here. That's actually going to be Navy crossing with what looks like the 1. There is a twosome further out left that I believe is behind everybody. So let's stay with this group of 4 here coming in. 1 pair being controlled by Navy, 1 pair being controlled by Stanford. So a tight race so far. Does Stanford have this cross?
A little bit of
Navy.
confusion on the chat room. We're looking into tiebreakers by record. Yesterday, it was a sail-off because the teams had only met once. If the teams have met twice and one team has won both of those matchups, that is the tiebreaker according to the college sailing procedural rules. So that's why we're checking records. The only way we would have a sail-off is if all other tiebreakers remain with a tie. Which
So
I
if
don't
those
think is
teams
gonna
have
happen.
gone 1-1 against each other. We already mentioned Georgetown controls the tie over Charleston.
Right. I'm just looking at Brown. Brown lost to Charleston and won to Georgetown. So they are. That was in the gold, in the top 8 round. In the earlier round, they had a win against Charlestown, and a win against Georgetown. So Brown over Georgetown. Georgetown over Charleston. Let's take a look at Charleston's record against these teams.
And as we come around Mark 1 here, sorry, I wasn't really paying close attention. It looks like a 1-4-6 at the moment, a boat spinning for Navy. So Navy has the 1 and the 6 and now the 5-6. So it's a play 2 for Stanford in green as they go around Mark 2 onto the run. I'm sure Stanford would love to come away with a win here on their final race. Not going to make it into the final 4 of this year's team race. And that's a shocker, I bet, for people like Chris Love especially. A lot of people expected Stanford to come away with a win here. They were arguably the best team all season long, and not getting it done here at the Nationals.
Yeah, I am a bit surprised. They certainly have the depth. I thought, like a lot of people, I thought they were going to be in the final 4, but so hard to do that, and we're seeing it's now coming down to this last race. Just an update on the work I'm doing. Charleston was 1-1 against Brown, but took 2 losses to Georgetown. So
So
even
it
against Brown.
Sounds like if Brown can win this last race against Yale, that would eliminate Charleston from the Final 4.
That is what it seems like, yes.
And Yale, of course, sitting pretty in that number 1 spot, but they would love to go into the Final 4 with a 2-race lead. Would take a lot of pressure off them in that Final 4. So this is a pretty heavy race for both squads. Brown trying to eliminate Charleston with a win against Yale. If our math is correct, and, you know, I wasn't a math major. I don't think Chris was either. He had something to do with video or TV or some nonsense.
We didn't have to take math in college. I don't remember how that works.
But anyway, still shaping up like a nice 2-3-4 for Stanford as they approach the leeward mark. Nothing really doing there for the high-low that Navy is trying to execute. And apologies if you're hearing some nasty sniffles from my end. I've just been having the hardest time dealing with some allergies down here.
Sorry to hear that, Zeke.
I know. I think it was because I was making fun of CVS yesterday, how many times they were calling me. And maybe they were calling me to give me some Claritin or something. Would have been needed because I'm struggling here. So are we pretty happy with that logic, though? Brown can get a win here, which would put them at 14-6.
Yeah.
Giving them a tie with St. Mary's. So St. Mary's in, Yale in. Brown would be in for sure with a win. And if they lose, they would be in a 3-way tie with Georgetown and Charleston, and controlling the tie over Georgetown. Georgetown controls the tie over Charleston, and 1-1 right now, I believe, between Charleston and Brown. Is that right? So Brown needing this win to eliminate Charleston from the Final 4, if we're correct.
Well, I'm just looking at the procedural rules, and it's not, in the case of a 3-way tie, it's not necessarily whether you beat a specific team. It's the total wins when those tied teams met, if that makes sense. So
Well,
it's not about how many times you beat a particular team. It's how many wins you picked up against those 2 teams. And so if you look at the record here, it looks like Brown actually has 3 wins against the combination of those teams. So regardless of this race, it looks like Brown is going to be in.
Well, I don't know where Paul Perry went, but I need him to go figure out what's going on, because I see Charleston getting in blue boats here on the beach and sailing out. They don't have another race in the Final 8, so it looks like they are preparing for a sail-off. So somebody knows what's going on. Stand by.
Okay. Well, I am standing by here as Zeke is headed off to try to get some more information as we finish up the last couple races of this round robin. We're still also, I believe Zeke's also going to investigate that yellow flag. We've got no we've got no information on that yellow flag in the Yale-Stanford race. That would certainly affect the standings at the top. I don't think it's going to be enough to get Stanford back in, as they're 2 wins behind those other teams. But potentially, with a win here, yes, as a matter of fact, if they were to win here and have that decision reversed or have a chance to resell that race, Stanford could also be up in that group. So we are really at the mercy of information here at the broadcast tent. So coming up to the finish line, Stanford in green, still controlling this race.
So I think I've figured it out, at least according to head coach Ward Cromwell. So it's always going to be a sail-off to break a tie going into the final round of a national championship, according to Ward the Wizard. So there's definitely going to be a sail-off between Georgetown and Charleston. If Brown loses this next race to Yale, then they will also be involved in that sail-off, the winner of that 3-way sail-off getting the last spot in. If Brown wins against Yale right now, then Brown is in the Final Four, and there will be a sail-off between Georgetown and Charleston for the last spot into the Final Four.
All right, well, that's a little bit conflicting from what I've been hearing, but that sounds okay as well.
And that's coming from Ward Cromwell.
Right, so who really knows? Stanford picking up the 1-2 here.
So Stanford, good for them, getting a win in their last race of the Nationals.
Well, Zeke, we were just talking. Were you able to hear any more information about that yellow flag?
No.
Realizing, of course, that if that race were to be resailed, that Stanford would still have a chance to catch up to those teams. Yale would also be tied with Brown and St. Mary's, and all kinds of crazy things could ensue. So we do still have to
Stand by.
Figure out what that was all about. Love to put that behind us. So Zeke was going to run off again and try to find us some more information about that yellow flag. We haven't heard anything, which makes me think that it's been resolved with no change to the scores, but we're just going by what we saw. All right, we now have final word on that yellow flag. Final word coming from the Yale team, I believe the source. The protest was disallowed, and the race will stand. And so that means Yale, the top record, 15-4, first place going into this next race. Stanford, 12-8 overall, and short of the Final Four. And beyond that, we're still working it out. St. Mary's, second place, 14-6. It's the third and fourth spots we're worried about. And at the moment, Charleston and Georgetown are 13-7. Brown has a race coming up.
Good afternoon, everyone.
That's Dylan Paiva. Dylan corrected me yesterday on a bad call I made on Allie Blumenthal's mother/father. So apologies again to that. So how do you like, what do you think of St. Pete so far, Dill Dog?
Oh, so far I think it's a beautiful venue. You know, we showed up here. It's 85 degrees, blowing, I don't know, maybe 12 to 15 knots out there on the race course, it looks like. All the sailors that I've talked to so far say it's some great racing out there.
So you've decided to come down and watch some team racing rather than go to Busch Gardens or something on your last day before the big race?
We have decided. You know, it's always our goal to come down, check out the venue while we can, get the opportunity. You know, we've spent the last 2 weeks practicing and kind of relaxing, taking it easy. So now we're here to study the waters and get ready for tomorrow.
Sweet. Are you sad you're not team racing?
A little sad, yeah. They would, you know, ODU has never qualified for team racing while I've been there, and I was hoping to make it this year, my senior year. But, you know, I think that the better teams from Mesa ended up making it, so a little bitter about it, but I can't be too mad.
Cool. Well, pretty good showing for Mesa here at the Nationals.
Absolutely. We're pretty happy with our district right now.
Yay, district pride. Well, we'll try to check back in with Dill Dog a little bit. Chris Love has just wandered back into the production tent, and he looks like he may or may not have some information. So he's going to join me back on the mic. Thanks, Dill Dog. And we are in sequence, by the way, for black and yellow, I believe, in under 2 minutes for sure. Hi, Chris. Welcome back.
Hey, Zeke.
Maybe we should look. Let's look over
Hey,
there.
Zeke.
Let's look out there on the race
let's
course.
take a look at the race. This race matters a lot. It's not a must-win. Brown is going to be in the Final Four, regardless of the outcome of this race, but it's awfully important for the national championship. So let's take a look at the start, and then I'll get you caught up with tiebreakers.
Catch your breath, Chris. Catch your breath, okay?
I need a golf cart or something.
So, again, this is Yale in black looking for that cushion going into the Final Four. This is Brown in yellow, who's looking to stay close, as we just got word that they are in the Final Four no matter what. So St. Mary's, Brown, and Yale will be in the Final Four. And Charleston is now, I don't know, they're still out there talking. So let's see. Looks like pretty even start across the board. Looks like Yale controlling at the pin. A little bit of a drag race here to get going. There's a threesome at the boat end. Looks like Yale. Oh, somebody
Brown
going back? No.
Now just ducking and tacking.
Ooh,
Not a perfect tack there, but somehow able to slip through.
And the starboard boat there by Yale just ducked behind Brown. I'm not sure if that was a problem. I don't know what happened. That was a sloppy bit of boat handling, and it's a red flag going against Brown, it looks like. And that seems about right. That was kind of a bit of sloppy boat handling there by Brown and making a starboard boat duck. So Brown will have a deep 6, and I don't think that they have a 1. So I'm going to say, you know, they could have the 1 in this group of 2 going out to the left. Boat 5 for Brown might be leading, but I'm going to say either way, it's advantage to Yale early on this beat as Brown gets a penalty right after the start and is into a deep 6.
So my update about tiebreakers is actually not final, because this information just keeps coming in. But I can tell you everything I know, and that's that the procedural rules were just as I mentioned. It's if there's a 3-way tie, which is the case if Brown loses this race. In the case of a 3-way tie, you look at the records of all 3 of those teams, and whoever has the most wins wins the tie. And in that case, it's going to be Brown, because Brown beat Georgetown twice. They beat Charleston once. Georgetown was 0-2 against Brown and beat Charleston twice. So Charleston has the fewest wins. However, we're not sure about the Nationals conditions. The Nationals conditions could be different than the regular procedural rules and could supersede that tiebreaker rule. And so I think that's why Charleston sent the boats out. I think your coach, Ward, had been looking at the Nationals conditions, not specifically the college sailing procedural rules. So,
but now
I'm still not ready to call this until we get confirmation. I will say I've spoken to people in ICSA and on the championship committee who have seen it the way of the procedural rules, which would mean no sail-off. But now I think hopefully they are also reading those rules again. So let's just take a look at this race. Like I said, forget about tiebreakers. This race is against 2 of the top teams here at Nationals, and a win here is going to get them 1 step closer to a championship. And we see both teams furiously trying to pin and stay out of a pin up there on the right side, on the left side, excuse me.
And the far right pair that's not on the screen is being controlled by Yale in black. So Brown again has that deep 6, and it looks like that furthest left Brown boat could be in the back as well. So still advantage for Yale. You see a jib ragging there. It looks like they're trying to go play 1 with that ace. And real quickly, Charleston has now sailed their blue boats in. They've pulled the red boats out, and they're de-rigging blue, looking like that. If there is going to be a sail-off, they're not going to be in those boats at least, but I don't think that there is going to be a sail-off. We'll see. And that looked like, is that a Yale boat spinning? Or did they just jibe out of a pin? Either way, Yale certainly in first place and with that ace in the hole. So Yale could be looking at yet another play 4 opportunity. That's Graham Landy tacking for Yale in that black boat, being double teamed now by 2 brown boats.
And it looks like a pretty effective double team. Yale continuing to just continuously tack. I guess that's what you do when you continue.
Continuously
up the
continuing.
Right side. And now setting up, luffing at the mark, waiting for that other pair who's coming in from the right.
And they're coming in hot. No attempt at a gap here by the last Yale boat for now. There is a bit of a gap, as we mentioned, as now 2 brown boats have been pushed around, so Graham Landy does a nice job pushing those guys around the mark. And a little bit of a shot of breeze coming down there. And now we see the last boat for Yale, if we can zoom in on that back pair. Stopping at the mark and now putting that gap in. And there's a tack by Brown, and if Brown is able to tack into an overlap, they would have room, but they don't.
Now that was a weak couple of tacks there from Brown, really just forcing Yale around.
And yet again, guess who in that gapping spot for Brown? It is Cam Coleman, and that can't tell if that's Judge or Tyler for Brown in the back.
Nah, it looks like Tyler with the
flow.
with
Judge
the
can
flow
have some
going.
flow
That's
as well.
true. That's
but
true.
yeah, so once again, we see the Haas for Yale. Cam Coleman, 5th-year senior. He's going to be a doctor someday. Again, tempting there, setting a little mark trap at Mark 2, slowing the whole thing up. You see Landy now jibing onto starboard, trying to push the race forward as the 4 in a 1-4-5. And Coleman quick to work, trying to put this gap in for Yale. And Landy, by the way, looks like he is back with Heather May as the breeze has dropped back down a touch. And there's a protest here from Brown in the 6. And it's a green flag, so no penalty on Coleman as he continues to try to sail Tyler high on this run. So both boats that need to push right now is Landy for Yale and Tyler for Brown, and both doing a nice job. Coleman just trying to hang on to that overlap to continue gapping. And Landy now tacking, so a nice job by Brown. I'm not sure if that was a penalty or just tacking out of a luff there, but not much of a gap here for Yale anymore.
Well, these teams are taking their time on this leg. In this breeze, Brown really hard, playing back hard, not waiting for the mark.
And Chris Segerblom, who's not in the picture here, is conservatively keeping his 1, as is his job in a play 4. So he's well ahead of the pack here. And Coleman's got to get to work.
Yeah, that gap for Yale has completely disappeared at this point. Things change quickly here. We may see a play change coming up.
Yep, and that's Colin Smith now luffing Landy, and Tyler's able to break below him. So Landy might have just been pushed into 6th. Here comes Coleman again to try to get a piece. And not. He's
all the way
luffed.
behind everybody.
Yep, so
Brown breaks through.
Brown doing an excellent job there. They may be a little bit vulnerable to that inside with Landy, but if they can get across his bow, things are going to be looking really good for Brown.
Landy's still going fast on starboard on the inside lane.
So now we should see Segerblom starting to get back in the picture as he's slowing his boat down at Mark 1. And look at Landy has just hung on somehow and now going back into play 4. So not trying to go play 1 with Segerblom. Roles have changed.
Yeah, that seems like the conservative play here. Much easier to play back on that 6 than to try to push forward.
Absolutely, and so an awesome job communicating there between Landy and Coleman as the roles swap, and you see immediately Cam Coleman is in a great pushing position to push around the course. Landy in a great position to put a little gap in on who I believe now that's Colin Smith.
Coleman's going to cross one of the brown boats, but they're going to be inside at the mark. Do they have?
there's
Are they going to be able to
Segerblom.
go 1-2? Yes, Segerblom closes the door. But he's still wide around the outside. If Segerblom, there's a protest from Sego.
So umpire call from Sego, who was in the right place at the right time to do that mark trap. Let's see how this call goes.
I believe they push Coleman into the 1 regardless.
Yep.
As long as Sego doesn't get flagged here, Yale's going to hang on to at least a play 4.
Yep.
If not improving on that, sending that back boat all the way around. It looks like they now have a 1-3-4.
Yep. And don't see
Any call
any
from
flag.
an umpire. We had two. I saw 2 hands go up.
Green.
Green. Yes,
flag.
green flag. And so Yale actually improves their 1-4-5 to a 1-3-4. Brown is very vulnerable here. That 2 barely hanging on as Yale splits up the course, protecting the edges.
And immediately we see this big lefty that we've been seeing all day as this left pair is now looks like they're crossing everybody. Not over yet, as it's hard to see where Yale's boat 12 is compared to these guys on the left. And I think that Brown is now controlling 2 pairs. There's a green flag, so somebody called for an umpire. It's a green flag, and Yale is now back into a play 4 as they got vulnerable left at the bottom of this beat, and Brown catches a shift and shoots up into the 2-3. So Brown looking to maybe start playing back, I would think.
Well, Brown sure would do everybody in ICSA a favor if they could win this race, because I'm still hearing this is not resolved. They've pulled everybody on shore. The quote I have here: "They're resolving conflict with the procedural rules, the sailing instructions, the nationals conditions, and the racing rules of sailing," because all of these documents apparently allude to some tiebreakers, but they say different things.
Well, I bet we'll have an answer at some point. But for the meantime, it is definitely a 2-3 as now the breeze has dropped off, and I think it's a 2-3-6 at this point for Brown as now the 2 and the 3 come back. And yet another play 4 for Yale, but not necessarily playing back to gap that last boat for Brown. That's boat 10 for Yale, now tacking back to the middle, and Brown again escaping to this left side. So Yale getting a little bit vulnerable left, and we'll see what this breeze does.
The breeze tapering quite a bit, and this is when it gets a little bit wonky.
Wonky?
Wonky.
A little bit wonky. It's getting wonky out there.
As we see Brown trying to slow down on the left side, keep things balanced.
There's Landy in 6th gear, I think,
Wow,
crossing
look at
everybody
the
for
boats
Yale.
on the left getting wound up as that lefty comes in. Another flag coming. I believe it was green.
So can this left boat for Yale, I think that's still Coleman, can he keep this Brown boat in last? Really tight racing right now. It's all coming down to this boat handling here. As kind of a slow tack there by Yale. And Brown does control this left side of the course. And now it looks like the 6 is going to be over on that course right, screen right. So Yale, Landy looks like he's comfortable crossing the finish line in the 1 here. Confident that his teammates are not in the 6.
And this might be all over here. If Yale can squeak in at the finish, it's going to be a 1-3. They've got one boat. Oh, it's 1-2. They've already got one boat across, and that boat at the top right comes across and should be...
Yeah, stopping. So that's a 1-2 for Yale. And a huge win for Yale there. So
wow.
That's going to put a little bit of a gap between them and all the opponents joining them in the final 4.
Yeah, Yale
So
looking very strong. So just in case you haven't been following, Yale now 16-4. 16-4. With Brown joining Charleston and Georgetown at 13-7. 16-4. This means that if Yale picks up, this is unofficial, of course. If Yale, regardless of who's in the Final Four, if Yale picks up a single win in the Final Four, it's all over.
Well, St. Mary's could get to 17 wins. They're sitting at 14-6. So if St. Mary's wins out in the Final Four and Yale only picks up a win, then they would tie, and I don't want to talk about the tiebreaker. But yeah, certainly Yale in control of their own destiny here. And I think what that would mean, actually, if Yale can beat St. Mary's head-to-head in the Final Four, that would be the regatta for Yale. So,
right.
So that Yale team, again, we talked about them earlier, last year's maybe preseason favorite or midseason favorite or even end-of-the-season favorite to win the Nationals last year, and missing out in the NISA qualifier, not making it to Nationals last year, has come back with a vengeance and going into the Final Four with a 2-race lead over St. Mary's.